It's been quite a while since I've last put any Regalia deck profiles. I want to do this one which is based on the promo, so I ended up actually running this for try format in the last minute. We put together a team, so it was a very fun card to play with. This is sort of based around this idea of manipulating crit stacking and also having more ride consistency and calling consistency. So just to kind of go through it bit by bit, Angelica, 4 copies. So this card is very good against Link Joker, but other than that, you're not really doing anything else with it. It can be used for odd things like trying to get some gauges set up and things, and having the Regalia name is also important. 4 Seer Yggdrasil. Seer Yggdrasil is very good for, well, keeping this deck up to date, because if you don't play it, you're basically playing an old deck, so then you just don't keep up. And deck's a lot more defensive nowadays, so if you don't have Seer Yggdrasil, your deck is it's just going to get guarded so easily, and you just get clapped by some big stride play with some V-series cards that do multi-attacks and stuff, right? And then let's go through the rest of the list. So 1 copy of Diorong, that's just more of a filler slot, but it's a way you can search out CEO if you soul charge it mainly. You can use it for adding heals and things, but it's instant use. That's kind of the main appeal of it. Although I'm not the biggest fan of the card, because this deck actually really doesn't want to call it, because it's actually filling up the board with so much stuff. That's the ideal winning image, is that you're actually going to just pack up your entire board with things, and Diorong is just a vanilla once you place it. So it's likely that you might end up killing it in some of your games. Then 4 copies of Rujiso. This card is quite handy. It helps you to set up your engine so that you can go into Marduk, so when you're going first, that is. So when you're able to check top 5, you find a VAR, or if you already have VAR in your field, that is, you then just call it any Regalia, and then you place a Equip Gauge, and then VAR can soul charge 3 for you. And then you can keep VAR in the field longer if you want to, which, by the way, it's kind of easy to do now, because certain decks that used to be around more, such as Gear Chronicle, would be able to, and Nightmare Dolls as well, will be able to get rid of VAR. But now that there's less decks like that running around, you can keep on your field more often now. But to be fair, if they're running grade 3 first, the thing is that obviously it matters. It doesn't matter if they retire it, but because Nightmare Dolls and Steam Maidens were both ride down decks, they go back to grade 2. Marduk mattered more, so then obviously it hurt a lot in that matchup when you play against Nightmare Dolls and Steam Maidens back then, but that's not the format we're in anymore, which means that even if they went first, if they stay on grade 3 and they retired your VAR, it's not a big deal, because you're going to need less soul when you stride at that point, because you don't need to use Marduk anymore. So it's not that bad. That format just happened to be a very Achilles heel. Like, people say, oh, Regalia is quite good because you can counter Nightmare Dolls and Steam Maidens because they can just go into Marduk anyway. But actually, there are things that do, because it's those decks, Regalia actually does suffer a bit more in a way. So then, yeah, that's one of the things. But also, check top 5 to look for CEO Yggdrasil. Can also be good for setting up. It's just a way of searching CEO. It's not guaranteed. You're only checking 5 cards. But it's a line of play. The fact you can either go VAR, you can go CEO as options is always going to help as well, depending on where the direction the game goes. And then you've got 4 copies of Norn because you want to restand as well. And then 4 copies of the promo. So the promo actually has multiple purposes. So some people play these cycles either just for one of the 2 skills, if anything. But this is actually useful for both reasons. So I'm actually making as big a use as possible of both abilities. So to go through the crit stacking ability. So being able to give a critical is very good, and you can make something like your strides, or even if you're on Angelica, if you decide not to stride, you can give it 10k in a crit if you want to go that direction, which is really helpful. Marduk can inherit the trigger, of course, so you're able to actually swing higher if you have the setup, and if not, you can even just give it to Rearguard as well, and you're making more stuff lethal. And so it's not just the crits, but also the power gain, which makes a big difference. So that's really, really useful. And with all the generic crits in this deck that aren't Regalia name, which you can see down here, Mushu and Thviti, they're both very expendable. They're kind of like, it's almost like when you soul charge all those annoying critical triggers, sometimes it doesn't really feel as bad, because now it's like, oh, I've got a vanilla crit that I could just put on my deck now, and as the cost for the grade 2 promo. So it's almost like you're trying to get Regalia cards, but now you also have a reason to want a crit trigger as well. Obviously, Regalia crit, even though it's just 5k power, it accommodates both Minerva's cost and the promo. Then the other skill, the cycle skill that every clan has access to, checking top 5, look for grade 2 or less. Obviously, you have to be on grade 1 or less to use it. So this skill, which you do at the beginning of your ride phase. So this can be used to search for your grade 2 ride, which is Rugisa. So it's very good, these promos, because they have this thing where, like, for example, you're playing superior ride engines in like Regalia or Ezel, for example. You can search for bits for the engine and then set off your superior ride. Think of it in a similar way, but you're only looking for Rugisa. So Rugisa is sort of like our ideal ride target in Regalia. And so being able to play cards like this promo will make it so that any sort of Vanguard-centric skill on grade 2 will always, or even grade 1 actually you can do on, if you know, if there's any plays like that, then you could always guarantee going for the optimal rides. Guarantees, so sorry, it's such a stretch, increase the chances. So I've actually seen Rugisa way more times because of this promo. And not just Rugisa, so even if you already have Rugisa, you've also got as an option VAR. So what you could do is on turn 1, you could look for VAR, then call the VAR because you've searched it out. And that helps a lot because then you can set up your Soul Charge, which makes Marduk more consistent. So Marduk is actually, funny enough, easier to do because of this promo. And then the other thing actually to go on, so next is VAR. VAR is something you want to get on your rear guard because it's not got any Vanguard abilities. So this deck plays more grade 1s because I'm trying so hard not to ride VAR because it's quite important. So that's the whole point. You can counter charge with it, you can soul charge with it, and soul charge is great with Marduk, but obviously it's great for long game as well. Just only downside is Amaruda, obviously, because Amaruda requires 4 or less if you want to use the full effect properly to be efficient with it. The Puffy guards, so I'm playing 3 in this list, but 4 is almost probably just as good, to be fair. I think Sanctitude, it's more like a Saki draw if you want to use it in the OTT matchup, which hardly anyone plays OTT right now. Or if you want to use against D-Police, which you got a fair few people here and there playing D-Police. But otherwise, Sanctitude is just kind of okay against everything else. I mean, it's nice against Reindeer when they're sorry, not Reindeer, as in Heltrauder or something. But I feel like at that point, you should be able to kind of get a respectable enough hand. And Pulses aren't really as consistent as they used to be. So I feel like the gamble leans better on just having more Regalia named cards. And then, you know, just maybe going for the +1 to hand as and when it comes. But it's good mainly against History Collection. But I think a lot of the times History Collection isn't really that lethal as well. Except like a few decks which aren't played much. That's the thing. Like the most aggressive decks that you want Sanctuary against just aren't being used much. And even then you're having to open into it. But the promo could sometimes find it. So that's a plus side of it. But the deck is, I think, got way too many concerns with trying to just find pieces and things. Then 2 copies of Ordain Owl. So Ordain Owl is very good for powering up your units. So just imagine being able to just give crits, whether through Force 2 or through the promo. And then you're powering up as well, giving like, say, 20k power because you've got 4 grade 3s in your drop zone. And then you're now hitting for like 53k. So you can do stuff like that with it, but it also helps to increase your deck size during the main phase. And it's limitless. Well, depends on how many grade 3s you have drop zone. So unlike, for example, the Regalia grade 1 Expel Angel, which returns 3 Regalia to your deck, but then you draw 1, you're only able to put back 2, and it's a once per turn effect. So that obviously caps it, right? But Ordain Out is not capped, it's just based on resources of the amount of the amount of Regalia grade 3s you have, which helps a lot for that. So it's good as a finisher play. Obviously you don't want to draw it early in the game, it's not ideal. Diorung is also almost like an additional Ordinal, because if you already have Ordinal somewhere, like Soul or Drop Zone, because remember Diorung Soul Blast is the cost to search from the Drop Zone, so you can pretty much just cheekily extend your Soul as a resource. Then yeah, Ordinal, it's almost like a third Ordinal essentially. Then 2 copies of Connell. So Connell is a very awkward choice. Unfortunately, all the protection cards that Regalia has, that is Genesis, is grade 3 on Vanguard skill. So basically all the support cards that we could play are all Create Elemental or Keta Sanctuary cards. So you got the grade 2 Arthur as well. And the trouble here is that you can't use cards like Diorung on Connell or on also Arthur, because they have to be Genesis only. So you can't add them to hand, and so you have to hard draw into them. If you play Gleipnir, you could add them to your hand, but obviously they need to be in your soul, because Gleipnir can only pick out cards from your soul. But Connell is not actually as good as Arthur. Arthur is kind of better, but the reason I'm playing Connell in this list, the reason I chose it in the end was because I wanted more grade 1s. Because I really want to have VAR. I don't want to ride VAR, I want to call it. So by having Connell, Ordin out, and the PG as potential ride targets, that increases the chance of me having VAR as a rearguard. It's also a reason, by the way, to play a 4th Regalia PG rather than a Sanctitude, because you've got an extra ride target. In fact, technically, if you want to do that, it does mean that you could possibly justify taking down one of the other grade 1s as well. But yeah, the more grade 1s, the merrier, because it means VAR is more likely to be called out. I mean, things like Diorung can technically get your VARs back, but you're losing 1 soul because it's Soul Blast 1. So that's also another thing to think about as well. But Connell, to be fair, was mainly just good for the Grand Blue matchup. So it's not really good against something like Link Joker, which, by the way, if you're against Chaos, you can make do with just Angelica as your main Vanguard and just play the game like that. But if you're not killing them fast enough for whatever reason, or they start ripping into your hand because you're not plussing as much, then that's obviously when you've got to get a bit worried, because if you're doing like 2 drives and 1 drive, and you know, just these discards here and there which are all eating your hand, obviously that means cards like Deluge become a bit more effective, and also you're not doing as much soul blasting. So if you're not doing as much soul blasting, you can't do as much recycle PGs either. So there are downsides when you decide to stick on Angelic against Link Joker, but you do tend to do better against Chaos. It's just that you do have to be a bit you can't, like, you don't want to be too reckless. But if you have the option to call stuff like Arthur, then it's great, because Arthur stops the Link Joker G guards from touching your back row, so you could actually stride and then just let Arthur do all the protecting for you. But Connell can't do that, because Connell says target as much as possible. So if you're getting multiple back row, including Norn, locked up, then they're going to get locked up regardless, because Connell gets locked up, and then the additional locks as well, which would be Norn. So those are some kind of downsides of Connell over Arthur. But otherwise, ideally you'd like to ride Regalias as grade 2 because of the Regalia PG. I've always had that kind of issue with the deck where I don't really want to ride non-Regalias, because otherwise you can't PG. And yeah, the promo I think helps in that you can search for Regalia grade 2 as well. And then otherwise, yeah, that's more or less it for the grade 1 lineup. So then starter, obviously, 2 counter charge heals, maybe 1, but honestly I just want as many Regalia as possible. But it gets awkward because obviously you want different grades, and you're more likely to have a grade 0 than a grade 3 in your drop zone during your first G guard. It tends to happen. But obviously one of the reasons Marduk is played is to try and Marduk is used is obviously with VAR and things. If you succeed with Marduk, you're more likely to be able to meet the condition of the G guards that have the 4 different grades to get 15k shield, the Regalia G guard. And then there's 2 grade 3 heals, which are much easier to use a lot of times, because it basically self-satisfies its own condition of needing a grade 3 among the 4 different grades. And then of course you're more likely to have a grade 0 drop in most cases. One of the blue over trigger, a bit tempting to play the Keta one actually. It really depends. Like Keta over trigger, if your deck is more pure Regalia, I do think Keta is better, which I probably should have considered playing actually, because the blue OT doesn't really do as much as the Keta one kind of does. Like if you're not winning the game that turn, then you're unable to plus off of your drive checks. So Keta Sanctuary over trigger, it was when it first got revealed and released as well, it was like considered the least appealing one. But the thing is that when you're attacking, you're always drive checking, so then you're building hands. So when you play like in D format, for example, you may notice you play like a deck like Bastion or Minerva or something, and then you see that Keta OT, and then before you know it, you've plussed a whole bunch of hand. So these things, they do kind of add up, depending on the deck you're playing. And Regalia is actually one of the decks that does benefit from the Keta OT. In fact, if things are so bad that you're worried about deck out, you could literally just use Minerva to turn off all your drive checks, because the GB3 of Minerva, which would be easy to activate in a deck where you're playing a high amount of Regalia, the GB3 turns off all the drive checks because it takes away all their drives. So it's very helpful for that. It basically takes away 3 drive checks, which you're not playing any rare cards that have 3 drive or 4 drive checks even. So that's a reason to play Keta instead. 3 of the stride crits, just to help you stride. It can get a bit awkward in this list, to be fair, because we've only got Angelica otherwise as a drop for stride. 4 Regalia critical triggers, Very good when you're on GB1, when you stride, that is. Obviously, if you go into Marduk, you can't use it for the draw, which sucks. That's one of the reasons why Fenrir is quite good with this, because Fenrir can actually activate this when you go into Dion on your turn 3 or opponent's on grade 2. So you're actually able to rectify your hand a bit more, mulligan in a way. Obviously, late game mulligan, but then we've got 4 copies of the stride crit for Fenrir. There's no Fenrir in this deck, so there's no soul charge and draw, but damage check and draw can really help in a pinch. And other than that, it's there for the promo. It's there as as basically for the promo. Then as for the Sanctuary, we've mentioned that already. Next we have the G zone. So going a bit further down, Harmonix Messiah, which is an obvious one because Harmonix obviously 20k shield, nothing to talk about there. 2 of the G guard minus 2 crits. I was using that for I think certain matchups actually, because there's some formats where I've only played 1. But I kind of forgot why I was actually playing 2 of this. There was something I had in mind. Maybe I'll remember later. But obviously, when you've got all these cards, you can always get rid of some of the rubbish you don't need. To be fair, a lot of the cards on the field in Regalia are cards you want to keep. So this is actually one of the weirdest decks to... Well, this list, rather, is a bit awkward to use this G-Guard in. But if you're playing like some of the old school Regalia cards that have... +1 effect basically based on them, like Expel Angel or Scold, they have no cost and they just draw a card, so it makes you feel a bit better about using this G-Guard. But this engine, every draw is basically CB1 to draw. There isn't like a free draw thing going on in this deck while having some sort of like less useful unit stuck on the board for the long game. So the G-Guard's good for things like that when you've got cards on the field that are just glued there but you don't really care about them in the long run. That's when the cards like this become much better. But Jagged Ragnar is there as well when you can't use Minerva a lot of times, or for Bursting Guardians. Sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. To be fair, this deck is a bit weird. Like the restands make it good, but obviously you need to have enough crit as well for it. Marduk is, yeah, we kind of talked about it enough already. Kind of obvious why it's been played. Amaruda's there. You can go into Sentinel Restrict, but this is actually not as great for Sentinel Restricts. So one of the things I might change is that I might try and look into maybe playing more Soul Chargers or Soul Blast cost reducers, because I feel like the format is getting a bit more to a direction maybe where Amaruda is better. So I played cards like Connell because I was more worried about hand traps, but I'm now thinking that maybe that's not the right direction. Grand Blue is a hard matchup if you're not playing like certain types of cards against. Like if you just play nothing that Grand Blue is susceptible to, then it's a much harder matchup. But if you play like some type of card that Grand Blue hates, then Grand Blue is much more doable to deal with. But I think Shiranui is quite a dangerous deck, and it spams a lot of protects, so I am thinking about playing it just so I can counter Shiranui decks much better. Because to be fair, I think if you have Amaruda, then Shiranui becomes a lot easier to deal with, and it just demolishes the hand. It might even win the game, so might look into that a bit. But obviously you have to be a bit careful with how you manage your soul as well, if you don't want to lose out on the Soul Charge 5 and Draw 2 ability. Then 1 Witch Queen Loria, just so you can prevent deck out as well, but it's also big shield. You need to be on GB1. 2 copies of Ear, the Regalia G-Guard. So this is good for... Well, it's got the Regalia name, so it triggers Earth, but we don't really use it for that because the timing's never really... You never build up enough of a drop zone to justify it, but the fact that you can put 4 different names, grades from drop to soul is important, because you can do a maximum of 4 soul charge, which helps with Minerva. Minerva's quite a bit tricky in V format, V premium version of it, because the force markers, obviously those versions of the cards do not help you build soul, whereas the G series Angelica was designed to work better with Minerva, so you are working with some constraints when meeting that GB3 with this list. With any of these lists that play Angelica with the force marker, I've actually kind of sometimes wondered if I should even be playing as my boss card. I am a bit unsure, because obviously Link Joker is a reason to play Angelica, but there are... Yeah, and also the easy access to force, all done in one card, is obviously an advantage. But Marduk doesn't really appreciate G Angelica, because and neither does Amaruda, because you need to stride a Regalia to use. Well, you need to use a Regalia stride to get some of the effects off of G Angelica, like the check top 4 and Soul Charge 1. It's also CB1 cost, which kind of makes it a bit counterproductive, because you've got Norn and as well for that. But then you've also got the on-place move Regalia from your drop to Soul, which helps as well. So that there is a bit of both, but obviously if you don't have any Regalian drops in the first place because you're not playing the starting Vanguard from Jira, then it gets a bit it's a bit weird. The whole deck just isn't as well built for, I guess. So 2 copies of Earth as well, although it's not really come up much. I don't think the current format really makes it that great because there's just too much PGing going on now, so it's not as likely. 1 Dismal just to protect your Sea Yggdrasil. So that's more or less it for the Regalia deck profile, and I may maybe do some other versions later, but there's never really a true optimal deck sometimes, but I think now it's just more a case of what is the format and what do you want to play around. So this list is good against Grand Blue. Obviously though, if you don't draw Connell then it's useless, but it's a good list against Grand Blue, but not as good against Meg Conley, for example, because it's not playing Ereshkigal, for example, and it's not doing as much heavy soul charging, and it relies too much on G-Guards, so that's also a downside as well against Meg Conley. So there's always strengths and weaknesses depending on how you build the list against different matchups. So that's more or less it for the deck profile, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.